Architecting Web Apps, the Elm architecture. In this section, we're going to take a look at the most important concept available in Elm, which is called the Elm architecture. You're going to learn what kind of programs you can build with HTML module. You're going to also learn how to handle user input and perform the communication with the server. And then I'm going to explain how to ensure the type safety with JSON decode and JSON encode modules. We're going to wrap it up by learning how to interpret with JavaScript, introducing side effects with beginner program. In this video, we're going to take a look at the basics of the Elm architecture. You're going to learn how to use the beginner program, which enables you to handle user interactions. Then I'm going to show you how to use union types to represent messages in the Elm architecture. You can learn how to create interactive elements and handle the user input inside of the Elm architecture by using the update function. So the loop is going to look like that. We have the runtime of our application, then something happens, user presses a button, so we emit a message, and that message is passed to update function, which updates the state and returns that state to the HTML renderer, the view, and then we are back at the runtime. There is also a concept of commands and subscriptions, but I'm not going to talk about those in this video. So our app will gonna look like that. We're gonna have an input for the amount of questions and the select box for the difficulty. By default, in Html.Events module, which is supplying us with the event listeners for handling user interactions. For forms, they're only on input and on check, so we're gonna have to our own custom UnchangedListener. Let's have a look at the code. So I'm going to start with the introduction to this UnchangedListener. The UnchangedListener looks like that. I'm not going to explain how it works. We're just going to use it for listening for the changes in our select and input here. The idea here is that HTML works, passes strings as values of those elements when a user performs any interaction. So we're going to have to rely on strings by default. So this difficulty module that we have, I haven't extended it with two more functions. First one is keys, which extracts all the keys from this list. And by keys, I mean those string values, which are used to render this select over here. And those are all the obviously strings. So the other function is get, which allows me to get a difficulty from this list by using a string. And since it's a user input, there is no guarantee that it's going to be a string from this list, so we're going to have to supply a default, which is any. Then let's go to main. In our main module, I made a few changes. So I changed the questions to be an array because this is a more convenient data structure for representing questions in this specific case. So array enables us to update elements by an ID or index, which is extremely useful when we want to update questions and when we have multiple of the questions displayed at the same time. So when we are pressing at the button, we're going to know which value under which index to update. Also, I have added the select over here, and select consists of a select element and the option element. So here I'm mapping over the keys of the difficulty and rendering an option for every key that we have. So for the questions, I'm using array, so I'm using index map as well instead of a map, which is going to be useful later on when we're going to handle the updates. And obviously I need to cast that into list because HTML elements expect a list of children instead of an array, so we can't use array there. I'm going to go ahead and start using the beginner program. So beginner program expects us to pass a record 3 fields. So the first field, model, which is the initial state for our model, and we have a value like that already defined. Then we have a view, which we also have. And then the final one is the update, which we don't have. So I'm going to have to go ahead and define the update function right away. So the update function accepts a message and the current state and I'm using a model as a variable name, and it's supposed to return a new model. So this function acts as an identity function right now, so because it's not doing anything. And now Elm compiler suggests us already that I'm using a wrong type annotation here for main because it changed. So now it's going to be a program instead of a static HTML. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define messages we're going to have. And traditionally messages are represented with a union type, and it's usually called MSG. You can use pretty much any name, but this is the regular thing. So the first value is going to be answer. So this is a message I'm going to use for updating answers. This answer will contain an integer and string. So an integer is the index of the question, and string is the answer that we're picking here. In our app, the answers are not only limited to booleans, so we're going to have string values as well later on. When we're going to introduce the server communication, we're going to pick up the data from the API. The other one message is going to be update amount. So the amount is coming in the form of string from the input, and then we're going to have to parse it, and change difficulty, which thanks to get function, we're going to simplify to return the difficulty right away. So now I can actually substitute MSG everywhere. So instead of type for variable MSG with lowercase, I'm going to have a specific MSG type. That will help me to identify different issues, so I can use it there as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna handle the user input from this input field here. So I'm going to say that on change, we're going to emit update amount here. Okay. And now I'm going to add some handling for that in our update function. So here I'm going to be using pattern matching, and I know that I have 3 types of messages, and I'm going to add all of them right away. So all of them will act as identity functions because they are not going to do anything by default from the starters. So we're going to receive a string in update amount and a difficulty level in change difficulty. And all of those in this case statement don't do anything right now. So here I need to add some handling when we update the amount. So first I'm going to have to parse the string. So for that I'm going to use string to int, pass the string from the input, and it's going to return a result with either OK value or error. And we don't care about the error for now, so I'm going to just return the model right away. And if we've managed to parse the value, I'm going to add some additional constraints. If value is bigger than 50, and I know for sure that we cannot retrieve more than 50 questions from the API, then we're going to default to the maximum amount. It will be 50. And if it's smaller, then we just gonna use the original value that was passed. Basically, we don't need to check that functionality yet because, well, as long as the counter of the events is changing here, it works. Let's go ahead and add the handler for change difficulty. That's gonna be a little bit more sophisticated. So on change, and we're gonna emit change difficulty, but there is a little neat trick that I'm gonna apply here. So I'm gonna need to get the proper key by this string that is gonna be emitted when we are picking this one of these. And for that I'm gonna use this helper that I have defined. So it's called data difficulty get. And now actually I can use an operator for a function composition, which enables me to compose these two functions and pass the difficulty value right away to the constructor of the value here. This is a little bit tricky, but it's a useful thing to know, and it enables you to create more type safe programs. So we just need to update difficulty with the level of difficulty, because no matter what kind of input there is going to be, it's going to be a correct input. And now the most sophisticated part of this lesson, we're going to be handling the updates for the questions. And I'm going to start in a completely different module, which is called a button. And first I'm going to need to introduce some more functionality for this button. I want to make this button interactive. So I'm gonna enable, well, not enable, but I'm gonna add one more argument here, which is going to be called a message. So here I'm using a type variable, and here I'm using the name for the argument. And also I'm gonna need to import Html.Events exposing on click. This is the simplest handler. And on click, I'm gonna be just emitting this message. So this button is ready, but the application is failing now because this button is used somewhere else, and it's used in our question view. So in our question view, we are now missing the message, which I want to provide over here. So I'm gonna say message, and here I'm gonna say that I have a message that accepts a string, so we can put a string answer into this message right here. This is a little bit tricky, but we just bear with me. Okay, so here we have a button, and what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna create a value of MSG, and I'm gonna pass the label of this button or a question, one of the answers for the question. Let's go to main and tie it all together. So what I'm missing here right now in main is a way to emit an answer. And here I can use the index here from the index map. So when I click, I'm gonna get the answer for the proper question. Now the most sophisticated part. This is not super essential for you to understand what's happening here, but since it's an array, it's a little bit harder to manage. So just bear with me, and I'm gonna explain. So first we're gonna get the element from the array that we want to update by the index, and then we're gonna maybe map that, because we don't know if we are getting an element, if it's even there. There is no guarantee on the compilation level, so we're gonna have to use maybe. So if the element is there, we're gonna update the user answer with the just value that we have received over here. Okay, so the next step here is maybe putting that value back into the array. That could have been done in a single maybe map, but I think it's easier to read it that way, one step at a time. So maybe we're putting this question back into array with questions. So if it was there after we got it by the index, we maybe have updated it, maybe not, maybe have put it back, maybe not. So, and one more maybe map, because never enough. And now we maybe gonna update our model with the list of new questions. Okay, and now the final thing where we're gonna unwrap that maybe. So I'm gonna use maybe with default, and the default is model. And if there were no model, then there's gonna be original model. And if there was array element under this index, then we're gonna get the update to go through. This is pretty much it. The updates are working. You know how to use the beginner program right now.